Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Real Life Practice Podcast. I am Teresa McCloy.
And I'm Lindsay Sturkey, and we are so excited to welcome you into our conversation about what it means to practice our faith in our ordinary everyday life. In each season of the podcast, we explore a different spiritual practice, and we notice how it will help us connect with God and become more of who He has created us to be.
We love to talk about spiritual growth, explore our own life stories, and help you explore yours, and pay attention to God in the ordinary and the extraordinary moments of our days. And this season, on kind of this, let me say that again. And in these episodes that we're currently in, we're talking about the practice of slowing and how it helps us to be present to ourselves and also be present to God. So, Lindsay, let's dive in. We've done a few of these episodes. And just as a reminder, we're now on this podcast every other week, dropping those podcasts on Wednesdays. And then on the opposite weeks, we have our real life conversations for Christian podcast episodes that are dropping on the opposite week. So you're kind of getting two podcasts. Erica Vincent and I do the Christian coaching podcast, and Lindsay and I are doing the practice podcast. And we've been in this series about slowing. And so we have a couple if you want to go back and catch up since the first of the year on those. And today we're really going to talk more on a practical side. The word slowing as a practice is one thing, but then how do we actually build it into or make it a part of how we steward time and in that schedule place? Not that we want to be rigid about it. You can't just say, oh, right now I'm going to slow, but how does it become a part of our everyday ordinary? So let's dive in.
Something we've talked about in these episodes about slowing is that this is about an internal posture of how do we show up to our life. It doesn't mean that we're not doing anything or that we remove all activity, but how do we show up from our internal place of rest? Teresa, you talk about it as living from rest, not rush. And so while it's an internal state, there are things that we can do externally and practically to set ourselves up well so that we are more able to live from a place of rest. So we wanted to talk today about this idea of what does it look like to approach our schedule, our calendar in a way that creates space for slowing. How do we set it up? How can a schedule help us cultivate slowing? How does our schedule sometimes get in the way of showing up from a slowing posture? So that's kind of what we want to unpack today. So, Teresa, I'd love to hear from you. When you think about approaching your schedule, what comes to mind for you with how does that connect to this posture of slowing?
Well, I think you do have to create the margin in your schedule. We talk about this so much inside of the real life process and the modern day rule of process life, the modern day rule of life process that we've created that we, teach others to do in the work that they're doing or for themselves personally. And there is something about looking at your day and the flow of it and say, where would I like to make space for times that I can slow down and be present with God and invite Him in. And so I think you have to take a realistic look at what that looks like. It won't just happen. It is purposeful, it is somewhat planned. And then over time, it becomes a rhythm and a routine. We talk many times in the work that we do, how things move from a habit to a rhythm to a spiritual practice. And I think that's what slowing has to be. It has to intentionally move over time. So in the beginning, it may feel like I have a habit of getting up at a certain time in the morning or, doing a certain thing on a Saturday or a Sunday or in the evening time so that you can practice the posture of slowing just like you would learn to do exercises or strengthen that muscle.
I love that idea of being intentional and scheduling it in. And
Mhm.
sometimes we have to be a little more um, intentional at first and put it in so that, like you said, it becomes a more natural rhythm. especially if you're someone who, kind of think through your day and the pace that you have. Do you feel like you are rushing from one thing to the next? When an interruption comes up, what does that do to your day? Is there enough space to navigate it, or is that throw your whole day out of whack? And so as we grow in that practice of slowing, what does it look like to just really practically put in some space in our schedule that makes it not back to back of everything? And then once you kind of get in the habit of that, it allows you to do that more naturally, where, at first it might feel a little mechanical of, okay, I'm going to put in a 15-minute block here, a 15-minute block there. And that might be what you need at first until you kind of get into that more natural rhythm of slowing.
I know for me personally, this has taken several years to come with a different posture. Slowing is such an important part for me as someone who, in past behavior can be in that workaholic tendency, can be in that overgo, try to wear too many hats and do too many things. I will always have that. I am by nature that person. So I very much have to pay attention to intentional slowing. For me, it's always going to be intentional. Um, and I'm always going to have to look for those places. But over time, now it's a craving that I have because I know how badly I need it. So I had to make adjustments. I used to be a very late night person um, and felt like I did my best work. I don't think that's true for anybody really, but did my best work like, after the kids were in bed and all of that and I would stay up really late and do those things. And I have shifted to going to bed way earlier, getting up way earlier to find that quiet slowing time in the morning. I'm laughing internally as we're recording this because, and I say it all the time, and it's such a practical, crazy thing, but one of my favorite places for slowing is in my hot tub in my backyard. My hot tub's been broken for a month, so my whole life has been off. But I think too, when you think about slowing, hot tub sounds very crazy, but it's because it's in my body, it's present time with God. I love nature. I love the beauty of sunrises and sunsets and just looking out on my farm. You don't have anything covering that view. So it slows me down and sets my day up so differently. The last 30 days, I have been sick. It has snowed. What? You and I live in the same area. Way too
Too
much.
much.
Let's just say that. Way too much. Covered the ground, beautiful, but way too much. Couldn't get in my hot tub. And then when I finally could get in, it was broken. And so last night, literally, it got fixed. And I am out there singing and worshiping. And Dale's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, you just don't know how much I crave that private, quiet, no technology, no nothing time. And so I always, when I think about slowing, picture a place and a thing. And I have two or three places that invite me to that. So you might find part of your schedule is where. Where do I slow? Where do I go? And I think of Jesus in scripture going to the garden. And we read that often. He went to the same place. He went to familiar places, the synagogue, you know. Um, so you might identify in your mind slowing as a visual, like this is where I go. I know you have some of those as well.
I do. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about, yesterday we had a lovely day, a random spike in temperature where it was got to a high of 60, I think. And I went on a walk, a nearby place that I go on a walk that I hadn't been able to do for a while. And it just is a reminder to me that a practice like that of walking helps me to slow down and that it doesn't have to be a large block of time on my calendar. Sometimes we think that, gosh, if I'm going to slow down, it's going to have to be an hour or two of time on my calendar, but sometimes even just a 15-minute practice, something that for me, like you said, it's connected to my body, even just like that walking and movement and quiet really calms me on the inside. It helps me feel regulated. And so something as simple as that can be a practice of slowing, that it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time.
Yeah. And we talk about this often on the podcast. And as you listen in, all of these practices are related. So, is there a place you like to go? Is there a way you like to write that slows you down? So slowing is the physical to me sometimes, and the body part of spiritual practice is I hope if I'm in silence and solitude, or if I'm writing, we've talked about the practice of journaling, um, that all of those things are slowing me. So these are all interrelated, but you have to start somewhere. And many times it does mean in your schedule, you're finding some place. One thing you just mentioned about taking the walk in the middle of the day, um, you do want to find that margin and kind of start to fill it in as like that's what it's going to be for me. It's early morning. I am working right now on finding one in the evening that's a way that I slow down and make the transition from my work day better into my evening time. Dale and I are doing a lot more meals at home for all kinds of reasons, but like enjoying the practice of slowly preparing the meal and turning on some music. I like a little jazz. And just what does that trigger for me in my body to signal you're slowing down?
Mm.
You're letting go of the workday. You're releasing it. And that's a challenge for me. And so, I know you have kids at home. So, the mealtime, the transition time, you have more transitions than I do from, workday to meal with your family to bedtimes and all of that to maybe some slowed quiet time. So I think that's something to, what's my reality? This is not like a rigid block of time. And if you think about it that way, it will hurt you because you'll be like, I never get it. I never get it. And you start playing that crazy tape in your head of, I'll never get to slow down. I never do. But yet you randomly said, oh, here's 15 minutes. I can take a walk. You and I had talked yesterday, boxering, and I said, I hope you're out for a walk. And you said, yes, I got one in because I know how much that means to you.
Yeah.
And yet, I think everybody I talked to yesterday was trying to be outside, at least
Yes.
in here in the Midwest.
Well, I think so much of it for me, I've noticed, is it's good to be productive.
Mhm.
And also, I have to find times that I shift out of that productive mindset to just be present. And I especially notice that with my kids
Mm.
because in the evenings, there are certain times where they don't move at the same pace that I do. They take a little longer with some things that I would like them to just, go down the list and check the boxes and get it done, particularly at bedtime. But what does it look like for me to let go of that mindset of trying to get it done and just be present with them and to slow down? I have to often tell myself, we're not in a hurry. We don't need to be in a rush. It's
Yeah,
okay to slow
five,
down.
10 minutes isn't going to make or break
Yes, yes,
bedtime. Yeah.
absolutely. And so that's what I notice in myself is just that mindset of feeling like I have to just get things done as quickly as possible, that it's okay to slow down a little bit.
Well, and I think what you're describing is if this is not kind of a posture that you've taken in the past of life does move, can move slower, I can still get many things accomplished. There's a difference between accomplishment and, you know, what we're talking about. So I can move at a different pace, still have a day that's accomplished. And I've struggled with this because people will still say to me, you say this thing of live from rest, not rush, but yet I see you doing a million things. And I want to say, but it's from a different posture. I'm not as rigid to my schedule. I allow time. I'm not perfect at this by no means, but I allow time for if I walk out of this room after a podcast and there's someone here in my workspace that I need to take 10 minutes and yet I need to be somewhere at another time. I'm going to allow whatever margin I can to be present. And that's a slowness where I might have in old behavior blew right past them and been like, sorry, got somewhere to go. Boom. So it's over time. In the beginning, it may start out a little more scheduled, but then it becomes an internal posture that we carry with us. And I think that's what you're naming with your kids. Like,
Hmm.
does 10 minutes really matter?
Right.
Does, they made a mess getting something made or whatever. What's my ability to breathe,
Hmm.
see the presence of God in this, to notice? Slowing helps me notice
Yeah.
uh, the goodness.
I will say too that when it comes to using a schedule to help you create a more slowing posture, I think it shows up for me maybe differently than you, where, you know, and for some, there's a tendency to want to like pack your schedule full. For me, I have to notice when I am putting things off that need to be done. And if I am not intentional about planning my days, planning my time, noticing when things need to happen, well, then things that were not urgent all of a sudden become,
Mhm.
it's like that deadline is pushing, right? And then I get in that place of rush because I've waited too long. So I feel like there's that side of it too that
Yeah,
I've noticed
absolutely.
having an intentional schedule that I know I can adjust if I need to, but I am intentionally planning my time gives me this peace inside of knowing there is time enough for what needs to get done. I have a plan. I know that there's a time for it to happen, so I don't have to rush because I know that there's enough space for what needs to get done.
Yeah, and the language that we've kind of changed from even since I wrote the book in 2022 is a language of stewarding time.
Hmm.
That we have this beautiful place that we can steward, and we're not going to get it perfect, but we can steward in things like the posture or the intentionality of slowing. Um, and I think on a bigger picture, we can steward in times where I talked about my hot tub, but you and I both have other places, like an intentional place where we go away for the day to do a bigger practice of slowing and presence and get away from technology and phones and things. And most of the time that's outdoors. And so just paying attention to if I'm looking ahead in the next 90 days or so and saying, what is God inviting me to? Is there a day away? Is there a place that He's saying, step out of the everyday ordinary and be with me? I still believe that people do not do this often enough.
Mm.
But if we pre-decide and go out to that place and say, man, on this Saturday or this Friday, because my kids are in school or, you know, my spouse has something else to do, I can be very intentional to plan for some really long period of lingering and longing for God and being in a place of slowing. That renewal is everything to carry us through the heavy and hard lives that many of us are walking in.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where other practices we've talked about, like retreat, practices of Sabbath, those regular rhythms of intentionally really slowing down and
Hmm.
removing the noise and distractions and walking in a different pace. Not only does that time shape so much in us, it also changes how we show up to the rest of our week and our ordinary days. And so having those regular practices, it really does. It shapes our everyday pace. They're so important.
Yeah. The slowing piece that we're talking about in the scheduling to me um, is the underneath layer
Mm,
of then how we show up everywhere.
yeah.
And so if you're feeling that tension of like, I show up a little bit edgy. I'm edgy with family. I'm edgy with friends. I'm edgy in my workspace. I feel anxiety. I'm procrastinating. Some of this goes back to looking at our behaviors. If we if we're brave enough and courageous enough to look at them, can show us our longings. And I know
Mm,
the tool of the One Life maps that we have here at the process, we have so many maps that will invite you to explore that. If Lindsay will share more about that at the end of the podcast, but sometimes we need a tool to help us name it and be honest with ourselves and then go, okay, I want to shift this for myself in my everyday life. And I want to come with more of a posture of slowing, places in my schedule that are intentional, whether that's hot tub time or walks or you name it. Many times I find those are in the body. And but it's a process of beginning to shed those layers of, well, I've been told all my life I gotta be like this. Um, and yet that is not what I see modeled in scripture by Jesus at
Yeah.
all.
And I think that's where our schedule can serve us really well because when we are intentionally planning our time, we are able to carve out space for those moments where, as you talk about, we get up on the balcony of our life and see the bigger picture. If we are running at such a fast pace and our schedule is so packed, it takes time to do that. Again, it doesn't have to take a lot of time all of the time. It's, you can do this in the cracks and crevices of your day, but there's also value in blocking out a larger period of time where you can engage with a tool like One Life Maps or do a review of your week, have a retreat day with God, and that takes time. And so when we are intentional with our schedule, then we are able to set aside that time instead of just life happening to us day to day and saying, "Oh, well, there goes another day, and I didn't have time for that."
Yeah, I love the language you just used there, Lindsay, of cracks and crevices. And I think what has happened in my life and the life of many others I've seen that lean into practices is schedule it, make it intentional for a while,
Mm.
just like starting a healthy diet or starting, exercise program or anything that we're going to do. We have to be very intentional in the beginning, and then it will show up in the cracks and crevices.
Yeah.
It will just become part of your everyday life. I'm not thinking to myself every day, how am I slowing? Am I slowing? I'm noticing and I'm aware because I was super intentional several years ago to go, this is what I need to do. It's literally a matter of life and death in some cases, if you have major health concerns, many times a doctor will say to you, your anxiety is up, you're this and that. Like, so part of slowing is physically inviting your body to slow down your heart rate, to slow down your breathing, to be in those spaces outside of sometimes what can speed us up, even in looking at screens all day and our eyes being overly stimulated. So for some of you, this is critical that you invite this in. Um, and I, uh, God knows our greatest health needs. So I will just say that. So scheduling might be the beginning and then it'll show up in the cracks and crevices.
Absolutely. And I think something we've talked about on a previous episode was just the practice of noticing where in your day are you feeling rushed. So even maybe take the time to pull out your calendar and notice what's on it. What are the appointments? How much space is there between those? Where are the moments that you notice that you are just flying from one thing to another? And what would it look like to build some slowing into your schedule? Again, that might be a 10-minute window of time before your next appointment. That might be saying, I'm going to take an evening and put my device in the other room so that I can slow down and not be sped up by the constant onslaught of information that is on there. But what is one simple way that you can build a pocket of slowness into your day so that you are not so sped up on the inside and that you have space to slow down?
Mm, so good.
So, as we kind of wrap up, we want to share with you just a couple other ways that you can connect with us. We do a free resource with every season of the podcast. And so, we have one for you on slowing that just has some tangible ideas of ways that you can build slowness into your day. And so, check out the show notes to download that resource. We mentioned the tool of One Life Maps. This is a great framework that can help you notice where God is in your story. You look at your past, your present, and your future. And this may be a way to recognize, where does this show up in your story? What has the practice of slowing looked like? Were you rushed in your childhood? Did you pack your schedule? What did that look like for you? Even noticing this particular element of your story can be such a helpful practice. And so those are available digitally now, so you can get those as a personal download, or if you use those in your work or ministry with others, we have a subscription that allows you access to the tools in a way that you can print yourself. And so check out onelifemaps.com for more information on that. But that is a great resource to help you even in this practice of slowing.
Yeah, and thanks, Lindsay, for sharing all those resources. And we love when you're able to engage with something tangible, whether it's the free resource or the maps or all of those things. If you ever have any questions about any of that, you can reach out to Lindsay or myself. We're available. Our first names, Lindsay or Teresa at therealifeprocess.com. If you ever have any questions about anything we mentioned, you can also find most of what we're doing and where we hang out at therealifeprocess.com. And you'll find the podcast there, both of them, and other resources and free things as well. But we hope you'll join us next time in just a couple of weeks as we continue to listen to Jesus' invitation to learn the unforced rhythms of grace in our everyday, ordinary life. Have a great week, everyone.